All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Caron Jacobs. For those of you who don't know me, I am an imaging scientist at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And for those of you who do know me, you're going to hear me talk about, instead of ABIC, for a change, I'm going to steal Lisa's line and talk about some of my actual day job, which is working within a core facility and a research lab in the University of Cape Town. So with Mike, I run the internal core facility at the University of Cape Town while he runs AMI, and we partner in a lot of what we do. So one of the things that I was asked to speak about today is the activities we have around OpenScopes. And I wanted to frame it not just in terms of, well, it's a way to build a microscope. I'll come to that. But really our experience in working with the OpenScopes platform has been that it is a way to build partnerships. And it's those partnerships that are actually going to be really critical in terms of expanding imaging capabilities and infrastructure in Africa on the continent. So why are we talking about OpenScopes? What is that? What's going on? I'm going to take a few steps back. And you had, Ame shared this slide during his talk, just a quick summary of where microscopes are on the continent. And this again is community reported data from ABIC. And as Ame pointed out, and I'm going to draw your attention to the full continent, we might think there are quite a lot of dots there. There's a lot of the continent that doesn't have dots there. It tracks with John's talk this morning with the survey that we're doing. And you've heard from Mike this morning in terms of the Africa Microscopy Initiative and the Imaging Center. For those of you who were around for the session, the seminar yesterday, you heard from Cheng Yong Chu about the AIC and his work through AMI, and some of the discussion around possibly what could be done to start something here in Cairo. And I'm going to make a point that while all of that is, and it's not a new point, we've heard it before, all of that's really exciting and impressive and necessary, and it is insufficient. It's not enough for us to have a really fancy imaging center down at the University of Cape Town or in South Africa. Even if we have another one in Cairo, even if more pop up in 5, 10, 15 extra countries across the continent, it's still not enough. Because what researchers need is access to fundamental technology where they are, in their lab, down the corridor, in the same building, that allows you to go try something, play. Hey, I haven't looked at this under the microscope before. Let's see what it looks like. Hey, if I test this, what happens? Does this thing that I dreamt of at 3 o'clock this morning work? That's really hard to write a proposal for, even with a lot of effort, a proposal to visit Mike and his imaging center. But if you have access to something, even if it's really simple, you can test it. And that's what a lot of us across the continent don't have access to, which means we don't get to test our hypotheses. We don't get to just try, develop assays. And it's also really, really hard for us to train ourselves, our peers, our students. So these hubs are fantastic. They're necessary. They're insufficient. We need nodes. We need lots of nodes. We need more nodes than I had time to put on the slide. And they can be small. But where researchers are, our argument is that you need access to something that allows you to just test things. There've been discussions with AMI about equipment donation, ways to bring in low-cost equipment, used equipment. There are many ways to try and address this. And I was asked to talk about, what about frugal microscopy? What is frugal microscopy? So I'm going to start with, for those unfamiliar, basically, if you don't have access to a microscope and the funds to buy a really fancy, pick your favorite vendor, Zeiss, Nikon, Leica, Olympus, Revity, high content or wide field system, the reality is you could build something if you know what you're doing. You can buy some optical parts from a company like Thor Labs, and you can build something. And that image on the lower left it's a linear wide field fluorescence microscope. It's very simple, but you could use that for research. If you know what you're doing, you can build something really fancy. So that's from a lab in Japan, and I think that's a multimodal, actually not entirely sure what that system is, but it's, I got it off their website, and it's clearly built by optical physicists who know what they're doing. So there are labs out there who do this. And then there are people around the world who go, this requires you to know what you're doing, requires careful alignment of all the parts. It's not straightforward, but what if we think of systems to make it easier to get this alignment? And that's where the opportunity or the concept of frugal microscopy, apologies, I've got a mistimed, actually, let me just fix that quickly, humor me, a mistimed animation there. One moment, just because it's going to make it easier to see the slide. So I will keep talking. I'm trying to find the right window. Okay, so there we go. The concept of frugal microscopy, frugal meaning lower cost or cheap. And research, various labs around the world have come up with options to do it. There is, for example, the OpenScopes microscope. This is a really cheap in terms of a couple of $100. 3D printed microscope. You can 3D print it yourself. You can buy some electronic or optical components to go into it, and it's good for transmitted imaging. I think it can do a little bit of fluorescence, and it's you have a microscope. It's not very sophisticated, but it'll get you digital data. There's a group in Germany who came up with what's called the UC2 system. So this is another 3D printed system that it's modular. So it's all these little cubes, and you, depending on the capabilities that you want, you can build this. This specific schematic is for a system that's wide field or transmitted light. And the idea is to use a cell phone for a camera. And this is a limitation that you often see with frugal microscopes, that a way to make them cheaper is to, instead of spending money on something like an expensive camera, you use something like this. This limits your ability to do quantitative science, but you can get data. And then you go all the way to some really quite more sophisticated systems, such as the SQUID system from Manu Prakash at UC Berkeley. Thank you, Mike. One of the University of California's campuses, who came up with, again, it's some custom components, some Thor Labs components. You kind of need to know what you're doing, but it's a bit modular. You can make it really simple. You can make it more sophisticated. It's more expensive. And I'm actually not going to say anything more about any of these systems, except to bring home a point. When we talk about frugal microscopy, it's not free. For those of you who heard Liang's talk yesterday, said there's no such thing as a free lunch in microscopy. He was talking about something else, but the concept holds. Frugal. How about now? It turned it, I don't know why it turned off, but I just turned it back on. Sorry about that. So I'm going to recap. Frugal does not equal free. There's always a cost to these sorts of systems. It's on, okay. You need skills, you need time, or you need to be willing to compromise on the capability. The absolute simplest system, the OpenFlector on the far left, doesn't take a lot of skills to do. You need a 3D printer, but it's got a very small movement on the stage. It's only transmitted light. You can't do very much with it, but maybe it's just what you need. And that's something to think about. What do you need when you're talking about microscopy? Right. So this is my framing to tell you about a project that ongoing projects, I guess, that we've had in collaboration with a group at Imperial College London, and that's working with the open frame system. So the open frame system sits at this far right end of the spectrum, along with the squid system, in that it is not hundreds of dollars, but it's tens of thousands of dollars. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's cheaper, it's not cheap. But this system is built around the central sort of stacked system where you have components that provide the structure. And in these components, you can, on the internal cavity, insert components such as lenses, filters, polarizers, etc. And you can see the schematic. It has filter cubes that can slide into some of these slots. You can add cameras on the side. There's a specific layer to put in a tube lens, so you have the infinity space. Because it's all this nice stacked layer, it's easy to align, and it means that you can make it very modular. So your cost is in the construction of these components. They're typically out of milled steel, but the plans for them are completely open source. So if you can find someone locally who manufactures milled steel to high precision tolerances, you can get this locally manufactured. Or you can pay a company in the UK who manufactures them. Then your other cost is what bits do you put on it to make it work. So this is literally just a structure with one little objective sticking out the top. This is a schematic of these layers and how you might want to put, for example, an autofocus system, excitation coming into the sample, a detector on the side. Here, this gray blob is representative of these stacked layers, and depending on what you want from it, you can add a digital camera, an SCMOS, as opposed to a cell phone camera. You can motorize the stage. It can be a manual stage. You can put LEDs on. You can put lasers on it. You can configure it to do polarized imaging. You can configure it to do multi-channel wide field fluorescence. And that's the key point. By putting high quality cameras on this, making it properly aligned and stable, it is a research grade system. It is completely modular, so you configure it to be what you want it to be and what you need, not what the local microscopy rep is trying to sell you, or that your local funders are trying to make you buy because they want to put out a tender that sounds fancy. And it's basic. So if now, or it's upgradable. So if now you need wide field manual transmitted light, it's going to cost you $10,000. If in 2 years' time you want to upgrade it to a super res system, another $20,000 and you've upgraded it. And that's one of the benefits of it. So we have a partnership with Imperial College London, who developed this to work with the system. And my focus is on the really simple components, but this is just a slide courtesy of the group at Imperial College on how they've demonstrated the stability and usability of the system for much more advanced imaging, ranging from volumetric super res and correlative EM imaging to high content screening to optical tomography, volumetric imaging, quantitative phase. It's all up there. I'm not going into this. This is not a technical microscopy talk, but just to highlight that there's a lot of capability in a system like this. And we actually started working with Paul French and his group, so myself with the IDMU, Mike with African Microscopy Initiative, the team from Imperial, to work out, to pilot trying to bring the open frame system into Africa with a project called OpenScopes Africa, funded by CZI. So this project at a very high level was, and as a summary, our aim was to establish Cape Town as a hub for this technology with some expertise and equipment, and then to run training workshops online and then in person, and to host fellows who were feasibly going to be in the short term securing funding to get a system like this, to build one, to give them extended time, hands-on, working with it, building it, maintaining it, etc. We ran the workshops, so for those of you who've been around a while, there'll be some A, familiar faces here, B, you may have heard of this before, but from running online workshops, we ran some in-person workshops about a year and a half ago. We brought in additional systems and support trainers for this workshop. And everyone had about 5 days hands-on experience with these systems. And since then, we've hosted 3 longer-term fellows at Cape Town. Mike already mentioned this, but I just want to bring this up because it came out of this project. When we had a lot of researchers here for the workshop, a lot of them spoke about, oh, but I already have a simple system. It just doesn't have a camera on it. So in theory, I could do some good imaging, but it's not digital. So the team sort of came up with the idea, and piloted, had been developed in the UK, and us implementing it in Cape Town, a very low cost approach to buying an adapter for the eyepiece of your microscope. It's literally off Alibaba. It's not expensive, plus a low cost camera that you can run on open source software. And so it's either cheaply bought, cheap electronics and 3D printed parts, and you can adapt your manual microscope. And this is speaks to the philosophy maybe behind frugal microscopy, is if you think about what you just need and an easy way to get it, there are approaches to doing this that don't have to be expensive. Out of this project, 2 more now welcome-funded projects have spawned, one for developing more advanced systems, which I'm not going to speak about, and another for actually turning these microscopes into the open frame system into a more mobile system. So if we speak about us needing these hubs or these smaller sites with access to basic equipment around the continent, one way to do it, especially if the site says, well, this is great, but I don't have $10,000. Well, what if we put one of these in a suitcase? What if we make it really robust and stable, and instead of those pink dots on the map being individual universities or labs, what if they're a city or a province? And the microscope can be bought and shared by researchers that it can spend a few weeks, a few months at a given site. Researchers can pilot what they want to pilot. They can train their students. They can just test some ideas, and it moves on to the next site. So it's a community owned microscope that can share and increase capacity across a region for imaging. So the idea, this actually came from Ame, who you heard speak earlier, this idea for a mobile microscope, and we built it into, we've framed it as what's called the OpenScope Traveler. And it's also born from our experiences and interactions with this community. It is an inherently communal approach to doing science and microscopy because it has to be shared, it has to be supported. I see your time, I'm nearly done. So just to talk about, it sounds simple, but there's a lot of thought that goes into this, not just from the hardware, but from the way the system is interacted with. One of the things we've done is build in web teleconferencing functionality into the microscope itself. So there's literally, if you get stuck on the microscope, you phone a friend. Someone can help you. And it will be, when we get it out, shared with some basic components as well as protocols to make it really usable. We have a prototype. This is not a pipe dream. This is the first prototype of it that we literally got it and adapted in the lab a month ago. So it's actually pretty functional. It's got a range of magnifications on it, wide field, 4-color fluorescence imaging, as well as a little bit of dark field even, and it works. We've used it for cells, we've used it for bacteria, you could use it for anything in between. And it's actually been a wild ride to get this working because all the bits that we ordered from the UK arrived last month, and we've been testing it since then. So we've had testers, we were lucky to have some visitors from Kemri and CSRS at the time that we visiting us in Cape Town, so they were able to test it. We took it on a road trip to Stellenbosch to be used, and that is actually it. So watch the space in terms of what we're doing in terms of trying to make these systems more accessible to you. We're also in the process of trying to secure the next round of funding to actually get microscopes to sites, including, you heard from Ame, hopefully Cote d'Ivoire. But this is, in the meantime, just acknowledging everyone who's worked on all of the projects I've spoken to you about, but also just a reminder that you are not dependent on us running a project like this. The systems are out there, they're open source. That it's not the only one. there's a lot of opportunities out there that researchers can access.